here's the thing. Men are meant to protect and provide. That's how men are designed. Women thrive best when they are in a nurturing and caring role. That's true. And I'm going to have a lot of women come at me for this, but here's the reality. I have worked really hard for a very aggressive career. And what I learned is most men that are high value men, they don't give two shits about your degree, right? They want to know that you're going to respect them, and they want to know that you're going to have their back and you're going to be there, you're going to be loyal. That's what men value.
She's right. Most men really don't care that much about a woman's career. That's not what men value. But what I find really incredible about this clip is not just that she's acknowledging this truth, but she's not insulting or belittling men for having this preference. She openly acknowledges that this is high value men that she's talking about. That's rare. That shows a respect for male preferences. And she kind of has every reason to be a little bit pissed about these circumstances, right? Like if she's worked hard for an aggressive career, she's ambitious, she's achieved a lot, all power to her. And hopefully that place in society gives her the ability to travel, to have free time, to buy whatever she needs. But there is a recognition that it's not really going to increase her desirability to men. Did you guys see that latest Chris Rock comedy special where he was talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce? It was so funny. The joke was about how beautiful Beyonce was, saying that, she's incredible, she's got this voice, this career, this fame, all this stuff, but she's so pretty, her face is so beautiful that if she was working as a cashier at McDonald's, Jay-Z would still want to marry her because she's just that beautiful. But to demonstrate the differences between the genders, he flips it. And he's like, do you think Beyonce would want to marry Jay-Z if instead of all his fame and success, he worked as a cashier at McDonald's? I loved that. Chris Rock has always been so good on gender differences. His early stuff is so funny, but it's so rare for a woman like this to admit that all the work that she's put into her career doesn't really benefit her in terms of, increasing her attraction to men. So few women admit that because it kind of goes against this sunken cost fallacy. When a woman has been facing the wrong direction for a number of years and then suddenly she realizes that she's made a mistake, she's not that likely to admit her mistake and change course. No, she's too invested. If anything, she's going to work harder. She's going to double down. And when inevitably she sees that that's not getting her any results, men aren't finding her more attractive, the higher up the corporate hierarchy she climbs, she gets really angry. She gets really frustrated and she starts blaming men. That's the typical storyline. These pathetic men who find successful women intimidating. Men are awful, rah, rah, rah. For a woman who's invested too much, the reality of men's attraction is just too confronting. But deep down, she knows, we all know what men value in female partners. We want femininity, kindness, beauty, nurturing, family values, character, depth. Men don't want masculine women who are career obsessed, who've had a large number of sexual partners, who are overly materialistic. But instead of admitting their mistakes and taking responsibility, a lot of women are just getting frustrated.
Okay, we need to normalize the amount of people that women actually sleep with. I went on a first date with this guy last week and he goes, yeah, I always judge a girl if she sleeps with me on the first date. I'm sorry, Frank, but aren't you sleeping with her on the first date too? Somebody please tell me why it is okay for men to sleep with as many women as they want, but yet women cannot sleep with as many men as they want. I'm so confused as to why women are called sluts and men aren't.
Men and women are different. There, that's your answer. It's actually pretty simple, but look at her. She's literally screaming in frustration. Why is everyone else wrong? Why can't I get what I want? Men are wrong. Society is wrong. Why can't I as a woman sleep with as many men as I choose to? Just anger, screaming. Why such a strong emotional response? Okay, like it's not a big deal, You misunderstood what reality was. You invested in the wrong strategy. No problem. Just change course. Yeah, you've been sleeping around. You've been being promiscuous because you thought that that was okay. But now you've discovered that men judge women like that. And so if you want to find high quality man, you've got to change your strategy. It's not a big deal. If you reform your ways, adopt a new value system, start making different choices based on what men do find attractive, you're going to find a lot of success. We saw some examples of that in my paid course. But women don't seem to do that because they're in too deep. They're too invested.
I have a very big body count and I'm very happy, and I'm in
what's
stable romantic arrangements.
What's the body count?
Probably like 300 something.
300 something. Okay. 300.
Yeah, what about you guys?
Mine's at like 50.
50. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm also at 50.
50.
When you're that committed to a strategy, 50 men, 300 men, it makes sense why you'd be reluctant to admit this may have been a mistake. And so you keep doubling down. If you tell a woman when she's young, before she's had a lot of partners, that, hey, you know what, like being promiscuous is not really what men are looking for. You're probably going to be able to attract a high quality man who wants to commit to you more if your partner count is low. She's going to have a much easier time accepting that because she hasn't already started down that path. She's not invested. But for women who've slept with hundreds of men, they're not going to want to hear that message because reality is too confronting. It means that they've made this massive mistake. And sometimes it feels like collectively society has made this massive mistake. And the voices that are trying to get us to like, whoa, this isn't working. This is not a good idea. Let's take a step back. Just take a breath. Just chill out. Let's look at the differences between men and women and we'll try and figure out a better way for us all to be getting together. You know, something a little bit more wholesome, grounded in some good values, not just hedonism and casual sex. Like, I think that'll be better for everybody. But when so many people have invested this heavily in the wrong strategy, that message feels incredibly threatening. You can imagine the kind of terror and grief that might overcome you if you've spent years sleeping around and then suddenly someone tells you, and you know it to be true, like, hey, that was a really big mistake. You probably shouldn't have done that. That's a terrifying message. It makes sense why women would deflect, deny. The pain of realizing how wrong you've been, you know, you'd have that fear that it would overwhelm you, that it would destroy you. And in the short term, it might. That's kind of how grief works. It breaks things down, but ultimately it's for the purpose of rebuilding something stronger afterwards. Eventually, the truth does set you free. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment, but first I want to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Extra. I'm not exaggerating when I say that these guys have completely changed my wallet game. I'll prove it to you. This is my wallet, this big clunky thing I've got in my pants all the time. Bunch of money, my cards. I don't even know what that is. Honestly, sometimes I didn't even put this in my pocket because it was so bulky that I just didn't want to carry it around when I left the house. But this is my new Extra wallet and I love it so much. It's got all the fancy stuff that you want. It's got the RFID blocking so you can't have like your data stolen with like the wireless skimming. It's made of Italian leather from environmentally sustainable materials. It's beautiful to hold. It looks and feels crazy fancy, but it's also really sensible. I got my money clipped in here, and when I want a credit card, boom. You just click here and they all pop up. It fits 12 cards. It also comes with a tracking advice so you never lose your wallet. It's this lightweight thing here, so I can just call my wallet from my phone. Let me put it back in. Watch this. Oh no, I've lost my wallet. What am I going to do? I know, I'll call it. It works the other way too. If I lose my phone, I can use my wallet to call my phone. Very useful. I lose my phone a lot. I love this so much more. You want one, right? Well, good news, because my audience gets a 25% discount. Just click on the link in the description box below and use the code AG. Buy it, then you have the same wallet as me. Okay, back to why promiscuous women don't just admit that their strategy has been wrong. Why don't they start a new path, grieve the lost years, but then focus on making the future better? It's not as easy as it sounds because they would have to actually go against the culture. Like the culture, the narratives at the moment are not benefiting women. We're having a cultural moment right now where accountability for women is not being encouraged. I know the narrative in the manosphere is like everything's so good for women, everything's so easy for women, but I really don't think that modern feminism is actually serving women's real interests. Yes, we might be indulging women a lot and letting them off the hook and not holding them accountable, but is that really good for women? I feel sorry for women. It almost feels like for them to go against this narrative and to be like, hey, I've made mistakes, but I'm changing, would be interpreted as them just dismissing the whole culture, you know, existing on the fringe and bad-mouthing all of their sisters. It's just so rare, and I suppose that's why when you do see a woman like take responsibility, like genuine responsibility, and then shift her value system and do something different, it feels special. It feels rare. You feel like applauding that woman, like giving her a standing ovation, because that's just not what's in vogue at the moment. You know, women are not encouraged to have that kind of responsibility. When it comes to assigning fault and blame, women are encouraged to push everything onto men. That's what's in fashion at the moment, shaming men. And you're seeing this play out in a really interesting phenomenon, this new TikTok trend called passport bros. I don't know if you've come across this, but we're aware that like Western men are getting sick of the dating markets here. It's so tough. They don't like the entitled attitudes of like Western women. And so they're traveling to other countries where they still respect and value women for their femininity, and they're finding partners there. Seems like things have gotten pretty serious when the demographic of men in your country are having to go to another country because they're just finding the dating market here is just untenable untenable. You would think that that might be the wake-up call for both genders to say, what's going on here? Let's have some self-reflection. Let's make some changes. We've got to work together. But no, if you go on TikTok and you type in passport bros, you will see video after video of women just hating on men, shaming them, belittling them. What kind of man would do this? It's disgusting. Men are terrible. And apparently that vitriol has also now extended to the women in these countries who are accepting these men. And I came across this Filipino woman's response to the backlash and her calling out Western women, and I found it fascinating. You guys have to see this clip.
Interesting that your reaction is to attack the men who are leaving and tell them that they're losers who aren't good enough to get a woman in the West. Yep, once again, it's the man's fault. And you attack us Asian women too. You call us poor, uneducated, submissive, desperate women who are happy with your table scraps and rejects. But if you truly believe we were getting your leftovers, the men you don't want anyway, then why do you sound so angry and defensive about it and try to shame men for finding happiness here? Wouldn't you be thanking us for taking out your trash? And as for us Filipino women being uneducated, we have the same percentage of college graduates that you do, and what you call submissive is what we call being agreeable.
I don't know the context of that clip. It looks like she's in some kind of professional studio. So I can't speak to any of that, but I found her perspective very interesting. I can see in an alternative reality where the passport bros phenomenon isn't an excuse to just shame and insult men, but collectively it's considered a wake-up call. Okay, this is not good. What can we change? How can we improve things for everybody? This is not about blaming women at the expense of men. If women are acting in the West in a way that men don't like, there's probably some contributing factors that men have allowed for this to occur, that they're responsible for it. Maybe it's all just a backlash. It's complicated. But wouldn't it be rational if we see Western men leaving in large numbers to find women in other countries to actually stop, and for all of us to do some self-reflection? Why are they leaving? How can we improve things? What do men actually find attractive, and wouldn't it make sense to take that into account and start orienting our behavior in that way? But that is not the reality that we live in, and the sunken cost fallacy is the reason why. Women have invested too much in all the promiscuity, in this version of femininity, which seems like they want to imitate men, in dismissing and deriding and shaming male preferences as shallow and superficial and worth ignoring. They're so invested in that narrative, it would take such humility in order to bring them back from that. This sunken cost fallacy is really powerful, and I see it with men too. When a man is too deeply invested in a particular strategy, even if it's proved to him that it's not working, he's reluctant to change. The typical example of this is the guy who's bought into the Hollywood mythology of like the soulmate fairy tale ending, and he just believes that if he's nice enough, if he commits to this nice guy strategy, and he just really treats women really, really well, one day she'll be so grateful that she'll sexually reward him. So he spends his days doing favors to women, donating money to them online, paying them compliments, thinking it's all going to pay off. And if you point out to this guy, hey man, this 10 years that you've spent simping after women, this strategy, it's a dumb strategy, it's not going to work. He's not going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just change. No, he's emotionally invested. He's got his identity wrapped up in it. It's not going to work. He's too deeply invested. And the same goes for the other extreme. Like if you talk to some of these hardcore manosphere types who are like, oh, you got to spin plates and never show any emotions to any women under any circumstances. You just have sex with them and that's all. Even if you actually point out to them that there are happy couples 10, 20 years into their marriages who love and respect each other, who have emotional depth, if they're too far invested in that other strategy, then it's going to be too confronting for them to actually look at reality. I also see this in my Hey Hero requests, like guys who are just deep down like the black pill looks, like doomer kind of content, and you get too invested in that, there's basically no pulling you out of it. It doesn't really matter which one of these strategies it is. If you've spent enough time emotionally investing in something, it's going to be really hard to come back from that. But let me appeal to your masculinity a moment here, because it is your responsibility as a man to be facing reality at all times, no matter the cost. If you're overly optimistic, that means looking at some hard truths. If you're overly pessimistic, that means opening your heart. It means acknowledging that a lot of society and the dating market sucks, but that you as an individual have a huge amount of free will and autonomy to change that. You can carve out your own private little kingdom if you're smart. I really hope that you don't come to this channel looking for some kind of emotional salve that's just going to justify the story of victimhood that you've got going on. I would be very upset if people were using my videos for that. That's not the purpose. The purpose here is to educate and to improve. And so So if you can really listen to me right now, if you can identify as like, yes, I've gone really heavily down one of those strategies and it's not working, but I'm scared to change. I'm scared to start over from scratch. Let me just validate your fear. I get it. That sounds really, really tough, but I promise you, I will respect you so much more if you can do that hard task. As a fellow man, I would trust you so much more if I could see that, like a scientist, you're not going to publish findings that are forged. You're going to look at the hard data and say, okay, this is reality. I'm now focused on that. Doesn't matter if I was working on the wrong hypothesis for 3 years. You know you're on the right path if you could admit that you once were on the wrong path. So many men are scared to admit that they were wrong because they're worried that it makes them look non-masculine, like weak, like they're failures or something. But let me tell you, as an absolute fact, that there is a way to admit that you were wrong, to admit your failures in a way that glorifies your masculinity and makes you seem stronger and bigger. It's actually a necessary skill that every man needs if he's going to have a successful relationship with a woman. So how do you do it? Well, I answer that question in the full-length version of this video. What you're seeing here on YouTube is just a shortened, abridged version. If you want access to the full video, head over to my Patreon.